Hi everybody, I'm Gregg Redner. Just by way of introduction, if you're watching the video, thank you for being here, and if you're present or if you're watching later on, the Brazilian Philatelic Association is a remarkable group. Membership is currently free. We have a long history of publishing, a wonderful journal, and in addition, we have a regularly updated Facebook page and a YouTube page that's growing as well. So we'd love you to give some thought to becoming a member. I'm going to be talking today about Brazilian postal wrappers. This will be the third presentation on this. And we're going to talk about the 1907 postal wrapper issue. So as you remember, we've covered the 1898 issue, which is interesting because it was published erroneously first in Spanish, upset everyone, and then was subsequently published in Portuguese. And so it's a very interesting issue to study. And then we also talked about the 1893 issue, which is also equally interesting and perhaps less inflammatory than the first issue. But today we're going to talk about the 1907 Liberty Head issue. Now it's called Facing Left because the next 1918 issue faces right, and they're both the Liberty Head. So these issues were in use between 1907 and 1918. I think of all the Brazil postal wrappers or cintas that were issued, these are the most beautiful. They're the quality of the embossing and the lithography is really quite beautiful. So you can see they were issued in 20, 40, and 60 res issues, which is actually an incredibly clever thing to do. Because as we'll see in a little bit, the international postal rate was 50 res for printed matter at this time. And so you always had to uprate the package to be able to get it, and I will need your opinion on a couple of pieces which I can't explain as to why they're uprated the way that they are. So there are a couple of things that are really interesting about this issue. From a collecting standpoint. And as always, the 20 res issue was the one that was used the most. It was for local and internal domestic printed matter and newspapers and journals and the like. So it had to be reprinted a number of times. And so as you can see on the top right, there are three different types that exist for this, and so it really is quite a challenge to find, especially the later ones, the Type 3. One of the things that always perplexes people about these wrappers is the various sizes of them. I mean, it's listed as, in the catalog as 121 millimeters. From top to bottom and 340 from left to right. But then you find all of these other sizes. And this is because the American Banknote Company printed these in large sheets, and then they basically were cut. And there was no guillotine style device to cut the sheets. And so you end up with a lot of strange kind of measurements and things that are not exactly what's in the catalog. That's the reason for it. These were printed by the American Banknote Company in New York. And there you see, just to show you the difference on the left of the various sizes and the fonts of the 20 res, whatever we want to call that. So just an interesting look, and the change in color slightly. They were printed on kind of a buff color paper and also on what we call manila paper, but the manila is not quite as dark as it is in some of the earlier issues. They do come in specimens for all three issues. And these are from the American Banknote Company archive. Some of them have gotten out. But there seems to be some question as to whether specimen in this case indicates that they were actually sent out to the UPU countries for their reference as to whether this was actually a real copy of the postal wrapper or the postal stationery, or whether these are specimens that were created in the American Banknote Company for their archives. I'm inclined to think it was the first, but other people disagree with that. So domestic postage rates in 1907, printed matter, which was a category that included books, pamphlets, circulars, brochures, maps, and even sheet music, which as a musician I think is a smart thing to do. Also included things like legal papers. They were 20 reis for 50 grams or fraction thereof, and then they would go up for each 50 grams after that. Newspapers and periodicals, publishers and subscribers enjoyed a much lower rate as long as their publication was distributed regularly. And those were 10 reis for 100 grams or fraction thereof. And then there also was an urban local print mail, which I haven't found a lot of these, and maybe someone can send me a copy if you have one, but it's a distinct localized rate for printed items printed and distributed within the boundaries of the same city. And as you can see, it's 10 reis for 50 grams. So slightly half again as much expensive as the newspaper rate. International postage rates, unlike domestic mail, which was heavily subsidized for newspapers, all internal print media was grouped into the same base fee structure. So when you're sending something printed matter / newspapers internationally, it's 50 reis for 50 grams. So it doesn't matter where it falls in there. If it's 120 grams, as it says, you're required 150 reis postage, 3 increments of 50. And then there was also an optional registration fee. And if you're lucky enough to find one of these wrappers with registration on it, that is actually a real prize piece. International registration was very expensive. I really don't understand why you would register a newspaper, but it seems that some people did, and it was very expensive. And so those are really kind of prize pieces. Okay, so here's a double weight 20 reis postal wrapper, which is used to Torino. We can tell because of the uprating of this that it was 100 reis, and so it would have been double weight for the paper. So this one is a pretty clear example of that. This one is not. I think I have 2 in a row coming up that were 20 reis issue postal wrappers, but uprated to 80 reis. And as best as I can tell, and you more experienced postal historians might be able to speak to this, as best I can tell, there is no reason why this would have been posted at 80. It should have been 100 if it was double weight. It should have been 50 if it was single rate. And is it just a mistake? Did the person not know and they wanted to make sure that it was going to be that it was going to get where it needed to go, so they overposted it? I have 2, one coming up to Germany, which has the same postage on it. And I can't see any reason why that would be the case. Here's the German one posted to Magdeburg. Same thing, 80 reis, and I don't understand it. So I'll throw that out to the collective genius of this group and see if anybody has any thoughts on that. Here's a 40 reis issue uprated to 50 reais, which was the correct amount, posted to Amsterdam, a single weight letter, which is very nicely done. And here's another one posted to Aachen in Germany. Again, perfectly appropriate single rate letter. So 40 reais issue uprated to 50 reais. That's a beautiful one. I love that. And I think that's it. So any questions? Any thoughts? Okay. Well, if you happen to have any you receive a bolt from the heavens that explains to you why that is 80 reais for a 50 or 100 being the appropriate amount, I would love to hear from you. So please let me know. Okay. Thanks
Uh,
very much.
Greg, one
Yeah.
question, not about, I have no idea about the 80 Reyes,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you asked about the registered item. In the Russian context, that was done in the mistaken belief that somehow it would be less subject to censorship. And the rule of thumb was anything you did to make it less likely to be censored made it more likely to be censored. So it was not a viable strategy, but people did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, who knows? I don't know. I don't know, but that's interesting. Okay. Cesar.
Um, I was just thinking that often when a rate appears to be wrong low, isn't it sometimes the case that a stamp is missing from the wrapper somewhere or other?
It could be. It could be. It's possible. I'm not certain, but yeah, it could very well be. That would explain it. Cesar?
Uh, yeah. Uh, uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, I would just like to, may I share one postal rate table here very quickly? Uh, I didn't see the year of that wrapper. From the information I have, the printed matter outside, being UPU, would be
Yeah,
80 Hayes from 1922 to 27. So I don't know if that was the case,
I'm just
the
looking.
year. Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, like a lot of these, because newspaper is kind of soft and doesn't allow for good strike, it's not possible to
Yeah.
tell what the year is, but that would certainly make sense. That would certainly, that's
Yeah.
great. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay. And another possibility is, as our friend said, is a missing stamp. It's a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to present one of the topics I'm collecting, but specifically addressing one point. Uh, the subject is Brazil Definitive Stamps, ABN, American Banknote Company, issues from 1906 and 1917. And I will focus on curiosities regarding coil stamps. And also I added on some talk about proofs also very quickly. Okay. So I'm from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, uh, but I'm engaged also on Philatelic Society of São Paulo and also with the Federation of Philately from Brazil. And okay, so let's go ahead here. To start, we talk about the origin of this stamp series. The Correios do Brasil had a dissatisfaction with the quality of the stamps being manufactured at the Casa da Moeda at that time. So they are very concerned about the quality, the capacity of supplying good stamps. And so the director of the Correios do Brasil made a very strong report criticizing the quality of the service and asking for importing stamps. So this was approved. And so contracting for stamp production abroad, and once again with the American Banknote Company. American Banknote Company was already a known supplier from the Emperor time. And since 1906 was already the Republic, and so this series was emphasizing the Republic subject. So we find in this series, we can say four themes, four topics. The majority of the stamps are related to leaders of the Republic government. We have some stamps with the Liberty head. We have one stamp with Álvares Cabral, the Portuguese navigator that reached the Brazilian lands in 1500. And later, Barão do Rio Branco is a diplomat who's died in 1912, and this stamp was issued in the following year. So we have here all the face values from this stamp series. It starts from 10 reais, that was for newspapers, and goes up to 10,000 reais, a very high value. So we have here 10 reais newspapers, 20 reais local printed matter, 50 reais international postcards, 100 reais local postcards, international postcards, and so on. So each stamp value had a specific purpose, but when you reach the high values like 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, and 10,000, they had they were used mostly for multiple rates or money sending. You see here. So here's some examples. The 10 has stamp for newspapers, 20 has for printed matter, 50 has for postcards, 100 has for sport cards for abroad, 300 has for leather abroad from the first period, from 1906 to 1909. In 1910, there was a change on the rates. So we have this 200 has going abroad. Then we have registered leather, 17 heads for abroad in the first period, then 500 in the second period. And for the high face values, as I mentioned, they are used for multiple rates, money letters, money orders, or parcel post. And you see here this 1,000 Liberty head, 1,000 Liberty head, Coil Postal, and international registered letter of second rate. We see here a very high value, 5,000 plus 5,000 plus 1,000 for a money order. And here again, 1,000 reais stamp plus the 200 stamp for money letter. So here, in this case here, 500,000 reais was sent inside this envelope. Well, besides the usual perforated stamps, this series has booklets and coil stamps. So the booklets was for these three face values: Cabral 50 réis, Cabral 50 réis booklet, Van der Kolk 100 réis booklet, and Deodoro 200 réis booklet. They were issued a little late in April 1908, and each booklet was composed of four panes with six stamps, so in a total of 24 stamps per booklet, and cellophane to prevent the panes from sticking together was placed intercalating the sheets of the booklet. The booklet on the back cover, there was the postal rate table at that time, and these stamps can have their positions on the booklet identified by the non-perforated margin. So position number 4, we have this straight margin, position number 2, this corner, position number 1, this corner, position number 2, this corner. So those were the booklet stamps. And then almost at the end of the contract, coil stamps were issued. So we see this series started in 1906 and ended up in 1917. So in 1916, the coil stamps were issued for two face values, 100 réis and 200 réis. And they are recognized by having the two lateral faces in a straight line and non-perforated. The reel was made by joining together strips cut from the printed sheet. We use this specimen plate block here to explain that. So we have the sheet, the printed sheet perforated only on the horizontal lines. So after that, the guillotining to separate the vertical strips. So the strips were put together to form a longer strip and the reel, the row. So we can see here some typical stamps. The first stamp of the strip, then the regular ones in the middle. Then we have the paste up, the coil seam here. When you have this stamp over this other one here, and you see this coil paste up back view against the light, so you can see how this was done. So a stamp like this one here was put in the bottom part here, so they continuously glued to form the strip. The same for the 200 réis face value. We have here this example of a strip with five stamps with a coil splice here. And you see the same technique. Here we have the enlarged view of this part here, and you can see this line. That is the end of this stamp here, glued over this second one here on the bottom. And here is the view against the light. examples of using coil stamps. So they are used normally as the regular stamps for the same objectives that the perforated stamps were used. And I'm bringing here two curiosities or two doubts that I have to share with you. One is the number of stamps per strip, 10 or 20, and also any chance to find a 200 Hz coil stamp circulated before February 1916. And I will explain why I'm bringing these two questions here. First, the number of stamps per strip, 10 or 20. The regular perforated stamps had a printing sheet with 10 stamps in the vertical. So that's the regular printed sheet from this series of stamps, the perforated stamps. The Guatemaltecan catalog, 1929, states that each reel had 1,000 stamps. No mention of the number of stamps per strip. The Schiffer and Meyer catalog in 1975 mentions strips of 20 stamps. But is this concrete information or an assumption based on the other coil stamps used in USA? Because the stamps used in USA were made normally by strips of 20 stamps. So has ABN manufactured a specific printing plate or used the printing plate of 10 stamps in the vertical? Well, the ABN likely produced a specific printing plate with 20 stamps in the vertical dedicated to coil stamps to make easier the manufacturing of the rolls. But I'm not sure about that. I'd like to see a proof of that. So ideally, find a strip of coil stamps long enough to include 2 splices in the same strip would for sure clarify this matter. So we could, if you have this on our hands, we could count on here and check how many stamps we have in between 2 splices. I didn't find a strip long enough. The closest I could find was this fragment with 11 coil stamps, but there is only 1 coil splice. So in this fragment here, we have 11 coil stamps. This one here is a coil splice. So we cannot conclude what was the distance between the 2 splices in the row. So this is the first topic. Does anyone have a strip of coil stamps long enough that includes 2 splices? Okay, so I move to the second point, that any chance to find a 200 Hz coil stamp circulated before February 1916? Well, these coil stamps started circulation on February 10th, 1916. But searching the official report, Relatório da Diretoria Geral dos Correios, for the year 1912, we find curious information. There is a value of 2,200,000 reais in coil stamps of 200 Hz stamp. What it means, 11,000 stamps that were distributed to post offices, the agencies, during the year 1912. Also, there is a statement that inventory of 383,000 coil stamps of 200 Hz equivalent to 76,600,000 reais in the safe by the end of the year 1912. So it's very interesting because they state there are already coil stamps. Pardon. So we had, at least by that, a total of 394,000 coil stamps produced by that time. And here we see the information, 200 reais coil stamps distributed to post offices during 1912. So they have here ordinary stamps, booklets, rolls, and here they say what is the agents that received and the amount of money in this kind of stamp in this post office. So, and here bobina means real. And the inventory of 383,000 coil stamps in the end of the year 1912, we see here bobinas, that's real. The value, 200 reais, the quantity and the total value. So with this information, I tried to get more information from the American Philatelic Research Library because they have information regarding the American banknote files. And I was surprised to see that there had been a preliminary production years before the actual production itself of the coil stamps. So you see this is a part of a correspondence from March 1913. The subject is stamps in rolls. This matter was taken up with you at some length in 1910. So this is an old subject already. And we furnished the stamps at that time in rolls of 1,000, but printed them from the regular plates and put them up by hand, pasting them together in strips. This, as you appreciate, is a very cumbersome business. And if the post office decides to go into this matter on a large scale, we would not like to do the work in this manner. And they say in the other communication that you'd have to improve machines and so on to make easier the manufacturing for a large scale. So the quantity of this preliminary batch was small. Not so small, but much smaller than the 5 million for each face value that we got in 1916. It's about 8% of the 200 reais coil stamps. So we have around 5 million in that preliminary batch, close to 400,000 stamps. So it's a small quantity. However, I still hope to find a coil stamp that circulated prior to 1916. Any help you is welcome. Trying to find that. So this is number 2. And now I will quickly talk about proofs. It's another doubt I have that I'm sharing with you here. Does it make sense to find a proof in this series of stamps that was not produced by ABN using the intaglio process? So a typical proof for this series of stamps, we have the die number, the American banknote name here. We can see normally on the back the relief of the intaglio printing. So there is no doubt it's very it's really the die proof we are talking about. But I saw a proof that it appeared to be of very high manufacturing quality. The sharpness, quality of the image, the ink color matched the ABN stamps, very, very good indeed. It appeared to have been produced via lithography, maybe other technique, but not intaglio. So there was no relief, nothing like the intaglio technique. Could this piece have actually been manufactured by American banknote? So there is no, for sure, it's not intaglio because the die number in American banknote name would be here, right? And this, there is only the drawing and the painting itself. So, and the question is, what for would American banknote manufacture such a lithography proof? So, is it a valuable item? Is it an item that can be considered? So, summarizing this talk, would say regarding this series of stamps from American banknote 1906, 1917, you say my questions or doubts, a number of stamps per coin on the stamp strip, any chance to find a 200 reais coil stamp circulated before 1916? And was the lithographed proof actually manufactured by American banknote? So, gentlemen, that was what I prepared to bring, and I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you very much, Cezar. That was really interesting. Do we have any questions or comments for Cezar?
You don't need to have questions. You may have answers.
Bruce, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm suspicious on the last item. Is it possible that that was manufactured as part of the American Banknote Company's promotional items where they would create these large collated, samples as part of their marketing or advertising? You're familiar
I
with all
think this
these
is a
big sheets.
possibility. Yeah, yeah. And Bruce, this kind of promotional matter, they usually did that by other technique, lithography, not intaglio, right?
I'm not sure, but I remember seeing some of the examples when I used to be at Treasury Department, seeing them up on the wall, massive collections and assemblages that would showcase their variety of product line, and you can still find actually samples of them online through eBay on occasion, where they'll mostly with respect to images and such. But
Yeah. So Bruce, it would not be involved in part of the process of creating and manufacturing the stamps, right? It would be something
correct.
else more commercial.
It would
I
be,
understand.
for example, celebrating. They would bring the dies out of the retirement to reuse them as a promotional thing or for a special commemorative or something.
Okay. I think this is a good, a very high probability of that. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
speculation. Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Anyone else? Well, hopefully we can all check our collections and see if we find any coil stamps with the postmark before 1916, and we'll let you know. And uh, you raised some good questions for us to keep an eye out for, in case we see any big strips of coils or anything, or if any of us have one. I don't think I'm sure I don't, but okay. Well, thank you very much, Cesar. That was fantastic. Um,
I thank you all.
So we have one more presentation today, and Janet and Nick Nelson are going to show us some proofs, essays, and color trials of the Empire period.
Well, thanks very much for dropping us in it, Don. We actually only agreed with Don the subject of this presentation just a few days ago. So I could tell you that we haven't produced a PowerPoint because we didn't have time. You know, but actually it's worked out really nicely because you're going to be able to see these lovely stamps full screen. So, you know, why collect proofs? And we can remember being at a presentation at the Solihull Philatelic Society. That's a posh suburb of Birmingham, England, about 25 years ago. And in the middle of the presentation, it was a lovely presentation. I can remember it, a thematic presentation on waterfalls by a lady called Jean Alexander. And she said, oh, well, of course, you know, all serious presentations actually have to include a proof or something like that. So up popped this proof of a waterfall stamp. And we thought, oh, we didn't know that. You know,
perhaps we'd better get some.
Perhaps we'd better get some proof. So over the last 20 years, Janet has accumulated in her collection some really lovely proofs from all periods, essays, you know, and colour trials. And so we just thought you might like to have a little quick look at them today. So I'll find the share button and find the right thing to share. And there we go.
Oh.
So we, so far as we know, there are no proofs of the bullseyes, or the inclinados, or the vertices. So our story starts in 1866 with the Black Beards, and this is the first production by the American Banknote Company for the Brazilian Post Office. And 1866, the quality of printing is quite staggering. These are truly beautiful stamps. One of the interesting things about the 10 reais value there is that there is a tiny flaw on the proof, just in the left-hand edge there, just 0.2 just there, which is actually not present in the real stamp. But they are really such lovely things to have. So next one in the value there, the 50 reais. And again, when you show these full screen, you see all sorts of interesting things about these stamps. And we can't quite understand that tiny little flaw on the forehead just there. We've not noticed that one before until we actually looked at it more closely there. And mentioned earlier was these composite promotional sheets which were produced by ABN, and one of those composite in the sense that there were stamps from several different countries, all on the same sheet, and two of which were of Brazil. That's one of them there, and you know, you just cannot understand the Philistines or Vandals who actually cut these sheets up. I've never seen a complete one, and we would love to have one, but and none has ever come up so far as we are aware. And interestingly, we also just came across a single one. That's the only one we've seen, which is essentially a colour trial, I think, So there's 50 reais in an alternative colour there, but otherwise of the same design. So that's the Blackbeard series. And then we're going to move on to the Whitebeards. And clearly this the Brazilian post office appears to be, complaining about the price, because these are very beautiful stamps, but they're quite expensive to buy. And so one assumes that they said, well, can you do them any cheaper? And they said, oh, well, we could knock off some lithographed ones or something like that if you wanted, but you're not going to like them. And indeed,
that's why.
That is what they would have looked like. And again, I believe that these were originally from a composite sheet. And again, we've got the complete set, but they're all individual ones, unfortunately. Once again, we'd love to have a complete sheet if ever we saw one. But clearly these were not favoured, particularly when you compare them with the proofs of the recess printed ones, which are absolutely exquisite. The proofs of these are on India paper, and this really shows up the quality of the printing absolutely beautifully. And you just got to sit there and admire this for a couple of seconds. And that's the 1000 one there. And you can see every bit of hair that he didn't quite manage to comb that morning before the photograph was taken. Now we move on to the notorious cottons, and for
1878.
Is it 1878? Something like that. Well, I'm not sure anybody really knows. They've always been called cottons until I think just 2 or 3 years ago, something like that. And the story always went that these were produced by this guy in Paris who was bidding for the job of producing Brazilian stamps. And it was this was the same story for years and years and years, decades, until I forget who it was published a book just a few years ago, conclusively proving that this chap supposedly called Cottons is actually a complete fantasy and the man never existed. And these are almost certainly American proofs of some description. The 1000 reais value you can get in all sorts of different formats and is relatively common, but much harder to find. There was also a proof of a 2000 reais value, and those are really, really quite hard to find, actually. We've just got a couple of those. They're in all sorts of different colours. So rather interesting, and makes a nice page or two in the album. And then just the one stamp from the Continental Banknote Company, and again, exquisitely printed there. This is on India paper mounted on card, this particular proof. What's the next one? Oh, there we are. So we move on to the small heads, and this is a die proof of the 100 reais value, but actually printed in a different colour. And it mentioned earlier that the post office was complaining about the quality of production of Brazilian stamps from the Casa de Moeda. At this stage, the quality of production was really excellent, we think. One thing to be borne in mind, of course, was that when they were producing proofs, they were using much higher quality paper than they were able to use in general production. And I think that had something to do with it.
Paper.
Yeah.
Recess printed from copper plates.
Yeah, so not a long-term proposition, I think, but that's one of our loveliest items. We think absolutely exquisite there. And this is moving on to the large heads now, and this is rather interesting because this is an essay, and so it shows accurately the large head in the middle, but the frame is completely different. And this is an essay without the value in there. So this is an unadopted essay. So rather a nice item, sort of curiosity type item there. And a proof of the 100 reais large head there. And you can see some alignment lines around it there. And here's a similar one for the 200 reais value. This is actually one of only two items in Janet's collection which has got a Sismondo certificate. The vast majority of certificates are by Peter Meyer or Jose Luis Febrero, and two or three others, Brian Morehouse, of course. But this is a Sismondo certificate on that one there. And then we move on to the Cephras. And here you can have an absolute field day. There's all sorts of different types. So we'll start off with the essays. These are designs which were not used. So you can see that they're very much in the same style, but not quite the same designs that were actually adopted there. And we've got a couple of those. That's an unadopted 300 Hayhouse design. And there's another unadopted 300 Hayhouse design. And then we can move on to some plate proofs. And again, these were often printed in different colours, but they were the actual plates that were eventually used there. To a selection of those, 50 Hayhouse. And, you know, wouldn't it be nicer if the 100 Hayhouse, this is the type with the white numerals, which are in the actual issue were produced on using fugitive ink, and by this stage are usually reduced to the point of invisibility almost. Wouldn't it be nicer if they'd been printed in a different and bolder colour? And then a similar proof of the 700 Hayhouse value. That's perhaps not quite such a nice colour choice there for the proof. And then you can move on to colour trials. So these are perforated, and they're sort of trying out just about every colour they could think of in every value. And we're just showing a selection of those there. That's a nice 100 Hayhouse in the solid colour type, and a block of the 500 Hayhouse value in a completely different colour from the one that was actually issued. These are all much bolder and nicer colours compared with the issued stamps. And you know, the 1000 Hayhouse value, they're often very, very hard to see the actual design. And if they'd used this colour here and used some decent quality paper, it would have been a much more handsome stamp than it really turned out to be. And then we've got these things here. So this is clearly still Empire period, because the name of the country is still Brazil. But we actually really don't know anything about these. And, you know, these things have been knocking around in our collection, Janet's collection, for quite a while now. And, you know, the top of the page of the catalogue page says, well, nothing really, because we don't know enough about them. There's lots of different colours that you can find, and a couple of different values there.
Yeah, thought to be about 1885, but
we don't really know. We haven't managed to find a book which actually tells us anything about those particular ones. Or, I mean, they might be in Guatemozeme, but every time we try to read Guatemozeme, of course, you've got to read it page by page and translate it. And so it's not an easy book to read. And similarly, that's an unadopted essay for a postage due stamp, tax stamp there. And then we were supposed to be finishing at the end of the Empire period, but we couldn't resist just going a few years further on. This is a lovely one here. So this is the start of the Republican period. And so there's a quandary. You know, the Post Office is obviously in a quandary. What on earth do we put on our stamps now in the Republican period? Well, clearly we need a man with a great big beard. And, you know, at first glance, you could almost replace Dom Pedro into that picture there. But this is actually Deodoro da Fonseca, the first president of the Brazilian Republic. That this is an essay without value. So a lovely one, not adopted, obviously.
yeah, they probably thought it was too similar
Yes,
to the
yes,
emperor.
yes.
So why are we bothering?
Yes, Emperor Fonseca or Emperor Deodoro or something like that. So that didn't quite work. Well, he was a monarchist, wasn't he? He overthrew the empire by accident, but there we are. And oh right, so we move on to what you've got to have when you're a republic. You have to have liberty heads, and we believe this series might possibly have been essays which could have been used instead of the Tintureo series, and we got a few of these, again in different colours and different sizes. That is actually a smaller stamp there, same design of head as you can see. And then we move on to replacements for the newspaper stamps, and these are absolutely exquisite. And it would have been lovely if they'd been actually used, but they would have probably been very expensive to produce, especially the bicoloured ones. But what a gorgeous stamp there. If only they'd used it. There we are. It would have made the philatelists very, very happy, but it probably would not have made the the finance director of the Brazil post office terribly happy. And then finally, the last one we're just going to show there. This is the tiny head issue of, was it 1893? And there was only one value, the 100 reais, in that series. I mean, it's an interesting series. There's several different types you can collect. But this is an essay of a different value. And this particular value, the 10 reais value, we have seen 2 or 3 of those around. This is the one in Janet's collection. But very interestingly, the Stanley Gibbons catalogue states that there are 2 or 3 other values as well, but we have never seen any. So whether this is just a figment of Stanley Gibbons' imagination, we're not entirely sure. But this has been a lovely journey for us, just generally adding to our collection every time we come across one of proofs, essays, and colour trials of Brazil. So hope you enjoyed, chaps.
Great. Thanks very much, Janet and Nick. Some really beautiful pieces. Any questions for Janet and Nick, or anyone have background on some of the pieces that they weren't sure what of the origin?
Oh, why are we getting
Wait, the funny little things are going up the screen there. I don't know why.
You're getting lots of applause. Those are all.
Thank you very much indeed. We finished putting that little bit together, I think, at about 10 o'clock last night.
Any questions or comments? Thumbs up. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah. We did have a question. Oh, yes, that circular one. Does anybody have any more information on those? We can't find... And Rogerio would be sure to know. He's not on the screen at the moment. Where's he gone to? No. Sometimes, you can't find out, actually. We have a stamp from Ifni on the northwest coast of Africa. This is a side collection. And it's not mentioned in any catalogue anywhere. And we bought it from a reputable Spanish auction house. And it was described as fine and rare. And so we bought the thing, and we looked it up everywhere. We couldn't find anything about it anywhere. So eventually, we with our tails between our legs, we went back to the Spanish auction house and asked them what it was, and they had to confess that they hadn't the faintest idea either. So clearly, the description "fine and rare" means we actually don't know what it is.
But it looks nice.
But it looks nice, yes.
And we haven't seen one before.
Yes. So there you go.
So it's like estate agents, isn't it?
Yes, it's
microscopic is billed as cosy.
Yes.
So there's obviously a philatelist's coded equivalent.
Something like that, yeah. Right.
Great. Well, thanks very much. Great stuff.